Friends, today the world has witnessed a decision that shook the global order, a decision that no other country had the courage to take. India has proven that true leadership lies in daring to do what others only dream of. For decades, powerful nations dictated the rules of the game, expecting the rest of the world to simply follow. But India has stood up and declared that it will not follow, it will lead. This bold action is not about applause or headlines, but about dignity and sovereignty. It tells the world that India will no longer compromise on its principles or bow down to pressure. What shocks America, and indeed the world, is not just the move itself, but the clarity and conviction behind it. Unlike others who speak in double standards or pursue hidden agendas, India has acted with transparency and fearlessness. For too long, nations lived under the shadow of fear, worried about the consequences of defying superpowers. India has broken that chain and shown that true strength comes not from the size of your arsenal, but from the courage of your will. This decision has marked the arrival of a new world order. India is no longer waiting for permission or recognition from others. It is creating the path for others to follow. And that is why the world is stunned. The message is clear. India welcomes cooperation, values partnership, but rejects domination outright. Friendship is respected, but subservience is no longer an option. This stand has drawn a line that many thought impossible to draw, and it has changed the rules overnight. The impact of this step will echo beyond borders. Nations that remain silent out of fear now see that courage is possible, that sovereignty can be defended, and that the voice of a determined people cannot be ignored. India has inspired those who only wished they had the power to resist, proving that conviction can move mountains even in the face of global pressure. And so this is not merely India's victory, it is the victory of courage over fear, of sovereignty over submission, and of vision over hesitation. The capitals of the world have been shaken, and the powers of the world have been forced to stop, rethink, and respect. India has arrived, and nothing will ever be the same again. Friends, today the world has witnessed a moment that has changed the balance of power, a step so bold, so decisive, that no other country had the courage to take it. India has done what others only whispered about, proving that true leadership is measured not by caution, but by daring. This action has sent ripples across the globe, a signal that the age of hesitation is over, and the era of Indian resolve has begun. For decades, powerful nations dictated the rules of the game, expecting the rest of the world to simply obey. Smaller nations were told to listen, to comply, and to never question. But India has stood up and declared, enough is enough. We will not follow, we will lead. This is not just a rejection of old patterns. It is a declaration that India is ready to write its own destiny, regardless of who approves or disapproves. What has shocked America and many others is not only the decision itself, but the manner in which it was taken, without fear, without apology, and without compromise. For too long, the world has been accustomed to timid voices, to cautious diplomacy that bends under pressure. India has shattered that expectation, showing that courage and clarity can carry more weight than even the greatest arsenal. This move has marked the arrival of a new era. India is no longer content with being a participant in someone else's script. It is now the writer, shaping the storyline of global politics. Cooperation is welcome, partnership is valued, but domination will never again be accepted. This change has redrawn the map of power and forced even the strongest nations to pause and rethink their strategy. The echoes of this decision will not stop at our borders. Across continents, nations long silenced by fear are now watching India with admiration. They see that it is possible to stand tall, to say no, and to hold on to sovereignty with pride. India's action has planted the seed of courage in the hearts of many, and it will grow stronger as the world realizes that a new path has been carved. This is not about confrontation, this is about self-respect. It is about a nation that refuses to bow down, a nation that knows its worth and will never again trade its dignity for approval. India has reminded the world that respect is not demanded, it is earned by actions that speak louder than words. And today, those actions have been heard in every capital across the globe. And so, my friends, this is not just a victory for India, it is a victory of courage over fear, of independence over submission, and of vision over hesitation. The world has been put on notice. India has arrived, and the global order will never be the same again. This is the dawn of a new chapter, written not in whispers, but in the bold voice of a nation unafraid to lead. This move was not made for applause, not for headlines, but for the dignity and sovereignty of every Indian. It tells the world that India will no longer compromise on its principles or bow down to pressure. For too long, nations have lived under the shadow of the powerful, forced to obey rules written elsewhere. But India has chosen a different path, one that is guided by its own vision and strength. What has startled the world and even America itself is not just the decision, but the way it was taken. No hesitation, no fear, no compromise, only clarity and conviction. This is the kind of leadership that redefines history, the kind that shows that power is not only about weapons or wealth, but about the courage to act when everyone else remains silent. India has proven that determination can speak louder than might. This step has announced to the world that India is no longer waiting for others to decide its future. It is creating its own road, and in doing so, it is setting an example for countless other nations. Cooperation will be welcomed. Partnership will be respected, but attempts at domination will be firmly rejected. The rules have changed, and India is the one who has changed them. The impact of this choice goes far beyond borders. It sends a message to those countries that have remained silent for too long, living in fear of consequences from stronger powers. Now they see that standing firm is possible, that sovereignty is worth defending, and that a single bold step can inspire millions across the world. India's courage is not just its own, it is a light for others who dream of freedom. This in the end is not only India's victory, it is the victory of self-respect over submission, of courage over hesitation, and of independence over compromise. The capitals of the world are now watching with new eyes, forced to acknowledge what they once dismissed. India has arrived, and nothing will ever be the same again. What shocks America and indeed the world is not just India's bold action, but the clarity with which it has been taken. No double standards, no hidden agenda, only a fearless step in the national interest. At a time when many nations hide behind layers of diplomacy and careful words, India has chosen to act with directness and purpose. That clarity has unsettled the global stage, because it reveals a power that is not afraid to stand alone when the moment demands. For too long the world has grown accustomed to compromises made under pressure, to decisions shaped by the approval of others. India has broken that pattern with one decisive act. The world expected hesitation, but instead it saw conviction. The world expected negotiation, but instead it saw courage. This difference is why so many capitals are stunned, because India has done what no one thought possible. It has moved forward without asking for consent. This clarity has sent a powerful signal far beyond our borders. Smaller nations that once hesitated to speak, now see that it is possible to rise and defend their sovereignty. They see that strength is not about domination, but about the will to act in the face of pressure. India has not only spoken for itself, it has given courage to others who dream of freedom, independence, and dignity. The effect of this choice will ripple across continents. At its heart, this action is not about confrontation, but about principle. India has shown that respect cannot be demanded by power alone. It is earned by standing firm in one's values. When a nation refuses to bend, even the strongest powers are forced to pause and reassess. That is why the shock is so great, because clarity backed by conviction is far more powerful than weapons or wealth. And so this moment marks not only a turning point for India, but also a lesson for the world. It is a reminder that nations rise when they act without fear, that sovereignty is sacred, and that clarity of purpose is stronger than any force that seeks to suppress it. What India has done today will not be forgotten tomorrow, because it has rewritten the rules of courage and leadership for generations to come. This decision marks the arrival of a new world order where India no longer asks for permission, but instead creates the path for others to follow. For decades, the global system has been shaped by the will of a few powerful nations, while others were expected to simply comply. India has now shown that it is not content with being a silent participant in that order. By acting decisively and with full confidence, it has proven that it is prepared to lead rather than follow. This shift has not gone unnoticed, and it has unsettled those who assumed the old system would remain unchallenged forever. The world is stunned, because the rules have changed overnight. Nations accustomed to holding dominance are suddenly confronted with the reality that their influence is no longer absolute. India has disrupted the old balance by showing that courage and conviction can rewrite the script of global politics. This is not just a symbolic act, but a demonstration of independence in its truest form. It forces other powers to acknowledge that the future will not be shaped by one or two countries alone, but by those who are ready to act with strength and clarity. For many nations, this moment serves as an awakening. They see that sovereignty does not have to be traded for security or sacrificed for approval. India's boldness has sent a message that every nation has the right to choose its own path without external interference. This message resonates especially with countries that have long felt trapped by the pressure of powerful blocs. They now realize that standing firm is possible, and that a single decisive move can inspire countless others to rise with confidence. India's step is not about rejecting friendship or isolating itself from the world. On the contrary, it is about setting the terms of partnership on the basis of equality and respect. True cooperation is built when nations meet as equals, not when one side dictates the terms. By making this clear, India has shown that it welcomes collaboration, but will never accept subservience. This clarity redefines the nature of global relations and signals a future where fairness, respect, and independence take priority. In the end, this moment will be remembered as more than just a political move. It is a declaration that India has arrived as a force that shapes, not follows, the world order. The shock felt in global capitals is not merely about the action itself, but about the realization that India has set a precedent others can follow. It is the victory of courage over fear, the triumph of sovereignty over submission, and the dawn of a future where nations can walk tall without hesitation. What India has done will echo for generations, and nothing will ever be the same again. Let it be known that India is not against cooperation, but it will never accept domination. For far too long, the world order has been tilted in favor of those who impose their will on others, expecting blind obedience. India has drawn a line that cannot be crossed. It has declared in clear terms that genuine friendship is always welcome, meaningful partnerships will always be respected, but any attempt to enforce control will be firmly resisted. This stand reflects a deeper truth, that sovereignty is not negotiable, and national dignity is not for sale. The decision taken by India has broken the chains of old expectations. Where others were expected to yield, India has chosen to stand tall. This is not the language of submission, but the voice of independence. It shows that cooperation does not mean weakness, and that respect cannot come from bending to pressure. By making this choice, India has reminded the world that equality must be the foundation of international relations, and that partnerships cannot exist when one side seeks to dominate the other. The shock that spreads through powerful capitals today comes from this very clarity. They see that India's position is not a gesture but a principle, not a temporary move but a permanent stance. This makes it impossible to dismiss or overlook. It sends a strong message that no amount of influence, threats, or pressure will alter India's course once it is set. That level of confidence unsettles those who are used to unquestioned control, because it forces them to recognize a power that cannot be bent. This example does not only serve India but also inspires others. Nations that have long struggled under the weight of foreign influence now see an alternative path. They see that it is possible to be open to cooperation without being vulnerable to domination. They see that respect is earned through courage and not by compliance. India has set a standard that smaller countries will remember, and this will gradually shift the way the global order operates. Ultimately, this stance will be remembered as a turning point in the way nations deal with one another. By choosing respect over submission and equality over domination, India has reshaped expectations of international behavior. It is a reminder that no nation, however powerful, has the right to dictate the destiny of others. And it is a declaration that India will walk forward with open hands for friendship, but with unshakable resolve against subjugation. The world has been forced to listen, and what it has heard will not be forgotten. For years many have watched quietly, sacrificing their independence in exchange for security or out of fear of consequences. India's decision has shattered that silence, proving that it is possible to act boldly without being crushed. This example shows the world that sovereignty is not a privilege given by others, but a right that must be defended with courage. In every corner of the globe, there are nations that have wanted to rise but held back, believing that resistance was too costly. They have seen treaties signed under pressure, resources exploited under the guise of cooperation, and decisions dictated from outside. Now they are witnessing a different path, a path where a nation can say no without hesitation,
where it can make choices based only on its own people's interests. India's step has become more than an act of policy. It has become a symbol of freedom. The courage displayed has begun to inspire voices that were once suppressed. Leaders who remained silent are now considering speaking out, and citizens who had lost hope are beginning to believe again. The lesson is clear. When one nation shows strength, it gives confidence to others to do the same. The ripples of this action do not stop at our boundaries, they travel outward, touching minds and hearts across continents. In that sense, India has lit a torch that others can carry. This is not about provoking confrontation or creating division. It is about showing the power of self-respect. When a nation values its own sovereignty above all else, it teaches others to do the same. The world begins to understand that cooperation is strongest when it is chosen freely, not when it is forced. India's example offers hope that the international order can evolve into one where balance replaces dominance and fairness replaces exploitation. In the years to come, historians will not only remember what India did, but also what it inspired. They will see this as the moment when silence began to break, when nations once too afraid to resist found their courage. The echoes of this choice will continue to grow louder, encouraging others to rise, defend their independence, and demand respect. India's action has become more than an event. It is the beginning of a movement that will reshape the way nations see themselves and the way the world operates. India has proven that when you act with conviction, even the mightiest powers are forced to pause. Conviction carries a strength that weapons cannot match and influence cannot silence. It is the inner confidence of a nation that knows its path, its values, and its people's will. When such conviction becomes action, it creates an impact far greater than any show of force. That is what has happened today, and that is why the world is watching with astonishment. Across global capitals, the reaction has not only been surprise but also deep reflection. Nations that once assumed their authority was unquestionable now find themselves reassessing their approach. Conviction backed by decisive action has disrupted the balance they had grown comfortable with. India's choice has proven that power is not permanent unless it is respected, and respect is only earned when others see strength of character. This has created an atmosphere where strategies must be recalculated. The lesson here is simple yet powerful. Conviction cannot be ignored. When a country acts out of fear, it invites dominance, but when it acts out of certainty, it demands recognition. India has delivered this lesson, not in words alone, but in action, that no one expected and no one expected, and no one can This has reminded the world that the true foundation of influence is not intimidation, but the ability to stand firm when tested. Other nations are now watching closely, realizing that conviction can be a shield as well as a weapon. They see that even in a world dominated by a few, it is possible to create space for independence and dignity. India has given them a demonstration of what happens when clarity replaces hesitation, and when courage replaces compromise. That vision inspires not just admiration, but also a quiet determination in many places where hope was fading. In the end, this is why global powers are shaken. It is not only about what India has done, but about what it represents. A single act of conviction has shown that the world order is not fixed, that even the strongest can be challenged, and that respect is earned by those who dare to act. India has reminded everyone that the mightiest powers, no matter how confident they appear, must stop, rethink, and acknowledge those who choose principle over fear. This is the message that now echoes across the globe. And so, my friends, this is not just India's victory but a triumph of spirit that goes far beyond one nation. It is the triumph of courage over fear, the kind of courage that refuses to bow down even when faced with overwhelming pressure. For too long, fear has dictated the choices of many countries, holding them back from making decisions that truly serve their people. India has broken that cycle, showing the world that progress begins the moment fear is set aside. This courage has become a force stronger than any threat or sanction. It is also a victory of sovereignty over submission. Every nation is born with the right to chart its own destiny, yet many have been forced to compromise under the weight of external influence. India has proven that submission is not the path to respect, and compromise at the cost of independence is no path at all. By defending its sovereignty without hesitation, India has restored faith in the idea that a nation's dignity is its most valuable possession. This stand has shown others that sovereignty is sacred and non-negotiable. Equally, this is a victory of vision over hesitation. History is full of missed opportunities where leaders hesitated, waiting for permission or approval that never came. India has chosen the opposite path, stepping forward with clarity and conviction. That vision has not only shaped this moment, but will also shape the future. For hesitation builds nothing, while vision creates the foundations of tomorrow. The world now sees a nation that is not only unafraid to act, but also unafraid to dream, on a grand scale. This moment puts the world on notice that the age of silence is over. India's action has forced nations to rethink their positions, to recognize that new voices must be heard, and to accept that the old order cannot remain unchallenged forever. What has been demonstrated is not aggression, but the strength of standing tall without seeking approval. It is a reminder that the balance of power belongs to those who dare to claim it, and India has claimed it with conviction. Nothing will ever be the same again, because a new standard has been set. India has declared to the world that courage, sovereignty, and vision are not abstract ideals, but living principles that guide real action. Other nations will draw strength from this example, and future generations will look back on this moment as the beginning of a new chapter. The world has been changed not by force alone, but by the will of a people determined to shape their own destiny. And in this change lies the true meaning of victory.